My commitment with my business was making my work and my impact inseparable. And the way that I was able to do that was by honoring what was real and what was true and what was authentic to me. Because I was too drained, I was too exhausted, I was too, in many ways, devalued by all of the effort that I was putting in to succeed within another person's world. And in the process of that burnout, it was really important to me to learn self-compassion and learn to really
Mm.
understand myself. And that's when I received a autism diagnosis. And being on the autism spectrum and really being able to learn about that, it gave me frames of that then honestly allowed for me to be a more authentic, empowered business professional. And in the process, empower the authenticity in others too.
Well, hello and welcome back. It's Amanda, and you're listening to The Amanda Kaufman Show. And we're continuing our segment on coaches that don't suck. And I'm so excited to invite Julia Armet to the podcast to come and have just a nice, frank conversation about what it takes to be a coach that doesn't suck. So, Julia, welcome to the show.
Well, Amanda, first I want to say the fact that I got the invitation was such an honor. And the reality that you and I go way back to 2018, and we really have seen each other's growth on both the personal level and the professional level. It means a lot to be able to share perspective because I know our perspectives have definitely evolved since the last time we were able to really connect like this.
Exactly. I was telling Julia before we went live that I was blown away by her presence in a coaching certification. That's where we met. And Julia, just take like 30 seconds and, use that presence to help us understand, like, what is it that you do? You are a full-time coach. Like, share. What is it that you do and who do you help and what's your jam these days?
I'm here to partner with individuals who are ready to do business differently. And it's often in those moments where perhaps you've experienced loss, perhaps you are really at the point of knowing that you can no longer operate the ways that you've learned in the workplaces or the structures that you've learned to succeed within. Often it's the
Mm-hmm.
high achievers who are finally saying, I can't do it anymore. And when they are at that time of rediscovering who they are, I'm their coach to really unmask their authenticity and through that process, co-create an authentic service-based business where they can really bring their interests, really bring their passions, and bring what makes them feel alive to the forefront of what they do professionally.
That's so awesome. And I love the fact that you and I kind of have very similar missions, but we approach it in such a different way. So, can you just take 30 seconds and talk a little bit about the business that you've built over the last few years? Like, what's it called? And what have you found has helped you hone your abilities and your appeal as a coach?
That's a really great question. My company is called Hire Playbook. So hire like the sky, playbook like the sports playbook. And it's a people and culture consultancy that is invested in rehumanizing work.
So
And
good.
I partner with both individuals who are creating service-based businesses and organizations who are serving their people and culture to create more aligned, embodied workforces. And what I do is I empower the identity discovery for professionals over the course of their career. And my own identity story has really informed me as I really stepped into Higher Playbook with this knowingness that it was time to really make our identities, our impact cornerstones of what we do.
So
So
good.
a lot of what happened to me in my career was I was really conforming to the standards, the expectations of others instead of being able to lean into that higher playbook, the practical ways of operating and more authentic ways of operating that I actually know now are reflective of my neurotype. As a neurodivergent individual, I know my motivational wiring. I know how to be fully energetically engaged, but that way of operating wasn't taught in the business world.
This masculine energy can sometimes be like a waffle where there's little compartments for everything and it's just all lined up like Lego or something. It's just like a waffle. And if you happen to think like spaghetti, where you see how everything is interplayed and intertwined and affects each other, and you try to live in a waffle world, sometimes that can be really challenging. So I'm very excited for you, for your work, for your growth. I'm curious, like, how much of your understanding now of like how we mask and how we show up perhaps not in our most authentic, most aligned self, because when I can speak for myself when I say when I allowed a lot more spaghetti, it was like magic what I was able to accomplish. And I love living in a world where I'm spaghetti and waffles. Like it's gross
Totally.
kind of a thing to think of having on your plate. But after coming from a very waffle dominant kind of a place of thinking, it really has been super empowering. So I'm so curious about your own experience with that. Like, is that something that's unfolded over the past 6 years as you built your business?
Yeah.
Or did you have an inclination before you started? How did that go?
My commitment with my business was making my work and my impact inseparable. And the way that I was able to do that was by honoring what was real and what was true and what was authentic to me. Because I was too drained, I was too exhausted, I was too, in many ways, devalued by all of the effort that I was putting in to succeed within another person's world. And in the process of that burnout, it was really important to me to learn self-compassion and learn to really
Mm.
understand myself. And that's when I received a autism diagnosis. And being on the autism spectrum and really being able to learn about that, it gave me frames of that then honestly allowed for me to be a more authentic, empowered business professional. And in the process, empower the authenticity in others too. Now, to
That's
really
so good.
contextualize that a little bit more, because I want to be able to talk about the spaghetti a bit, there's just aspects of the way that I process information, the way that I communicate, the way that I think, the way that I can occupy time that aren't really traditional.
Mhm.
So rather than see it as, oh, those are my areas that I need to work on so that I can fit into the waffle world, I've been able to say, wow, these are my spaghetti tendencies. These are my natural ways of being. And so then the aspect of how do we integrate those natural ways of being into the service that I provide, into the structure of what I have as a business, and into the conversations that I hold with people. Because it's often just having frames of reference to understanding who you are that then actually support you in creating businesses that are in alignment with how you naturally operate.
Love this. One of the questions that came up as being one of the most difficult for people to answer, and I'm wondering if this is similar for your experience, is what do you want? My hypothesis is that we're so in society not trained to have our own personal want, to have that identity. It really comes back to, in my opinion, who are you? When you know who you are, then you can know what you want. Until you know who you are, it's really hard to render an opinion on what you want because you don't know yourself very well. Like, what do you think about that?
The more that you are able to be honest with yourself, the more that you can actually tap into not just your wants, but your needs. And sometimes
Oh, that's
really
good.
being able to serve those needs so that you can then have a full cup to say, wow, what is it that I really want? Through my own journey, I've recognized that what I want is to experience what's possible in the presence of community, a loving community. I feel like when we're able to all be a part of something and all be able to feel fully expressed in our talents and know that we are a part of something, that is something that I've been fortunate to experience throughout my life. And it's not about the destination, it's about cultivating that everyday existence where you are perfectly positioned to play your part and you really revel in what it is that you are here to share. It's that desire and genuine passion to be yourself and contribute, where I believe is the sweet spot for entrepreneurs. Discovering that takes time. And I want to validate anyone who's listening that if you don't know what those wants are yet, I want to honor your needs and really say that asking yourself what it is that you need and learning how to become your own advocate is so central to fostering that sense of belief in self, but also the sustainability of being a service based professional.
I love that you brought up the sustainability of it because I don't personally think that it's talked about enough in our space. I think there's a lot of things that are talked about plenty that are really not necessarily sustainable. Love what you just brought up about community as well. One of the things that I know I struggled with in my first couple of years, especially, but I often have to go back to, and I notice again and again in the conversations that I'm having with others, is that they feel like a level of judgment or a level of shame. And, before we got on, we were talking in the core energy levels. So if you're familiar with those, awesome. We'll try to keep it plain language here. But our tendency when we're experiencing disappointment or we're experiencing judgment or we're experiencing shame is to actually withdraw from community and to isolate and to, I'm all for alone time. I love journaling, speaking to people that we could otherwise be helping. And so when I think of a coach that doesn't suck, I think of a coach who is actually very mindful about being part of something bigger than themselves and being part of community. So what would you say to someone who has lots of really wonderful intention, has done the studying, does the work, but does tend to pull back from community because they aren't feeling that they are good enough. I mean, that's frankly the number one reason that I hear is like, oh, I haven't spent enough hours in my business, or I haven't made enough money, or I haven't served enough clients. Like there's always this criteria that I hear kind of coupled with it for
Yeah.
why we're stepping back or why we're pushing our goals out by 4 to 6 months. It's always 4 to 6 months. But like, what would you say to that person?
I realize that when you're in those moments and you really just want to be alone, that is honestly sometimes really what it is that you need to take care of yourself. And I think that can coexist with this invitation to put yourself in an environment that is really validating. It's often
Mm,
when we are in an environment that can validate our experience, where we can really accelerate our growth because we don't just express ourselves, we get to experience other people, hear their lived experience. So if you want to leapfrog in many ways, go from a space of really feeling in potentially that drained, devalued, or even real hopelessness or powerlessness, which is valid, is natural. We all in our life have those moments of hitting those true points of ground zero. When you're at
mhm.
ground zero, a powerful accelerant to your success is really putting yourself in an environment where you really are seen, that you are reflected back accurately, because that environment is like the fertile ground for you to thrive and really grow into exactly the person who you know yourself to be, even if in the darkness, you don't even know what that looks like. Trust that the
Totally.
first step is the environment.
Yeah, I love that so much. I just think it's so wildly true that the first step really is environment. And it could be stepping outside, go for a walk outside. That's a first change of an environment. Or, like, sometimes in some states, some places, maybe your first step into community is more of a one-on-one conversation with somebody that you feel is a champion, someone that you can trust. And other times, I think that it can actually be easier to be a bit of a wallflower and just like edge your way into a bigger community where there's a lot of chaos and things kind of going on, and you're really there to observe as the kind of that first step. I think what's important is that you keep taking steps that you then are in full participation. Ideally, you're at this place where you get to flow out that same validation, that same acknowledgement, and that same thing that you're looking for. I think that's been my experience over and over again is that energy attracts energy. And so if you find yourself in this like really low energy state, it can be a little scary because you don't want to get it on other people. But the truth is that you can shift it out. And the more you're able to give that kind of energy of noticing others and validating others and, celebrating others, the more it tends to come back to you. Maybe not linearly, maybe not from the individual you did it with, but the more you do it in general, the more in general it's going to come back.
Beautiful. I loved what you said about that one-on-one initiation point. And I want to add a little detail there because when I connect with individuals who, neurodivergent or not, see themselves through my representation and visibility, what happens often is nervous system to nervous system, community member to community member, wow, actually being able to be reflected back accurately. And so experiencing what it feels like to not be alone because there's somebody else who exists in the world who is like you, that is central to then being able to cultivate that sense of being a part of something greater than yourself. If you've lived your whole life in, let's say, a marginalized group or in an underserved group, not recognizing it, giving language to that and then being able to immerse yourself, whether it's on social media and discovering communities there, whether it's in Amanda's community, coaches who don't suck, or if it's through partnering with Higher Playbook and beginning to have frames of reference developed so that you can actually start to see yourself and where you belong in this world and actually go from being that outlier to really integrating into meaningful work where you know you're making a great contribution.
I love this. I really believe that the age that we're in right now is so golden for being able to carve your own path, to contribute in ways that honestly weren't available to our parents. There's so many opportunities to select where you're spending your time in a way that's going to feel more congruent for you. The connectivity is insane, right? And the activity is insane. What would you say are the top 3 traits of a coach who doesn't suck?
Love it. Love that question. I'm going to say trait that really matters for a coach is transparency. And I don't mean that in the traditional sense of just honesty and openness. I mean being able to see beyond the veil and actually see the highest potential of who you're looking at, holding that person in the highest regard and being able to recognize the wholeness of somebody. So
So
that's the
good.
first trait. I also think in a coach, the quality of validation and somebody who's validating and really being able to look at every lived experience and recognize how that experience makes perfect sense for where you are. That validation aspect
thousand
is
percent.
so
Yes.
transformational. Another trait that I think is central to a coach, particularly for individuals who want to do things differently, is a champion. When you have
Mm.
somebody who can be a champion, because there are going to be moments on a daily basis where you hit those lows. And when you can really foster that sense of belief and it's coming from the external champion, that's when you can start to build that muscle of being your own champion. And that role modeling that ultimately occurs because you're really seeing a person who deeply believes in you, it ultimately just allows for you to have that strength, especially over time, to keep growing, keep building, keep challenging, keep striving, and ultimately keep discovering and remembering who you are. So those would be my 3 traits.
I love those. Those are so good. Right behind my computer, I have a few reminders just posted as people do. One of them was my favorite. I went to ChatGPT and I asked her, because it's definitely she, to draw. I gave it a picture of me and I asked her to draw me as the critic with a clipboard and me as the cheerleader. So I have them both like there, and it's meant to remind me like, hey, you get a lot further with cheering people on. Just because you can see opportunities for improvement doesn't mean you can't deliver it in a championing kind of a way. I do that just to help me kind of stay cheerful, and I find that that reflects back into my own work as well, like just the reminder to have some fun.
Yeah.
When you take things seriously, sometimes you can get a bit serious about it, And I think there's a time and a place for that. And I think when we have a hard time kind of adjusting that energetic thermostat, if you will, that's when we tend to get into trouble and out of alignment. We were talking
Totally.
just before we went live. I'd love to ask you about the idea of energetic interplay because we were talking about this ability to see and to be at peace with what is and how things are going, but at the same time, kind of have that more conflicted feeling even as you're accepting peace. I would just love for you to just take a second and explain that because I think that that might be what a lot of coaches who are struggling are contending with is like seeing
Totally.
and then experiencing the conflict.
One of the ways I really explain energy interplay is considering the multiple truths that you hold at once. If you can
Hmm.
see things through multiple perspectives at once, and you come from these emotional states that are, in many ways, paradoxes, when you can actually give names to those emotional states and then start to give language to not just the separate states, but the muscles. One example is we're looking at the muscle of advocacy and why advocacy is so central to who I am. If I
Hmm.
come from that presence, that level 6, anybody who knows energy leadership, consciousness of seeing the whole and seeing truly people for who they are, recognizing in the world injustice, recognizing in the world the barriers that prevent all people from being able to experience the same access to opportunity. I'm going to come
Hmm.
from the we and I'm going to fight. And when I come from the we and I fight, that's collective advocacy, a 6-2 in play. And so
Hmm.
we can start to look at any trait and we can wonder what's the muscle that is practiced through expressing that trait? And that's the interplay. So I
That's so
encourage people
cool.
to just look at what sort of energetic states they occupy, what sort of muscles they flex, and know that this dynamic nature of who you are as a human makes perfect sense because you are all energy all at once. And you
Yeah,
can,
I love this and thank you for explaining that and giving such a cool example of it because I think a lot of people, especially coaches, they're heart led. They see opportunities in the world for things to be way better. And then they experience the challenge, right? And it's like that challenge of people not understanding what you were talking about, the challenge of people not necessarily prioritizing things at the same level that you would prioritize them, and just kind of that exhaustion that can kind of come into it. So I see a lot of coaches, I call it personal development awareness guilt. And it's basically that experience of the interplay like, hey, I know my motives are really good and like they're in this higher sense, but because of the conflict I'm experiencing or the frustration or the hopelessness that I'm experiencing at the same time, it can be very confusing. It's almost like you're driving a car and you've got your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
wow,
Yeah.
I want to normalize that because sometimes it's not necessarily just energy, but it could be your wiring and biology.
Mhm.
So
Could
just being
be.
able to
Yeah.
work with your natural state and being able to know that seeing how you respond and how you react to various different contexts allows you to better know yourself. So lean into those moments of misunderstanding self or not understanding self or recognizing the complexity of self and knowing that totally is giving you the signs to make sense of potentially how you naturally operate. So this is a opening to self-discovery anytime you have that resistance arise.
So good. Before we wrap up, Julia, how can people follow you? Do you have anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
I do. I am able to be connected to on LinkedIn. So if you go to Julia Armet on LinkedIn, you can find me. What I'll also say is go to higherplaybook.com to learn more about my company. When it comes to working one-on-one with coaches, I partner with coaches in personalized ways to discover their identities and then bring those identities into how they can authentically impact. So if you want to build a business that is really compatible with the way you think and the way you operate, you can see me as a thought partner who can support you in your self-discovery and simultaneously support you in your business development. And just a resource that you can see as just somebody who has gone through it myself and deeply understands the importance of honoring your identity in how you work.
That's so good. And I hope that if you're listening and that it all resonated, do make sure that you follow up with Julia after, like right now, like do it right now. Make sure that you are subscribed to be able to catch our next show. And if you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, it helps people discover this episode. And I know that there are people who absolutely need to hear what you had to say today, Julia. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's awesome, Amanda. And I really just love how you connect with people in such a way that builds trust. And you're so genuine. This is who she is in real life, too. Like the energy of Amanda Kaufman. This is why you've built such a successful company, Amanda, that so many people around the country know you. And it's really amazing to be able to say, oh, I know her.
Well, I feel the same way. You've created something really, really amazing, and I cannot wait to see what you do next. All right, everybody, thank you for joining, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.